Joining us, Jonathan Schanzer, Vice President for Research, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
All right, what's the importance of this?
Well, it's I actually am not sure it's terribly important. At the end of the day, I think this could be a lot of posturing on the part of Saudi Arabia. They are undoubtedly the leaders of the Arabs who have joined the anti-ISIS coalition. But that is not quite a distinction. It is really the United States with the French doing most of the bombing. The West is shouldering most of this load. The Saudis are not flying the sorties, dropping the bombs. And so what they're doing is probably providing some basing or other assistance. They've not taken an active role. And I don't believe that the ground forces that the Saudis have to offer would be of the standard that would be needed in a fight against an organization like ISIS.
So it is almost just an announcement, but probably will not have a big effect.
I think that's probably right. I think that the United States and the other allies from the coalition are not likely to actually cash in that favor. Even though the Saudis have offered it, I think they realize the limitations of those Saudi forces. I think that, if anything, the importance is a symbolic one where the Saudis have come out and said that they would be willing to do it, that they're fully committed to this coalition. Of course, there have been a lot of questions about the Saudis and their commitment to fighting extremism. We know that the Saudis have long been the number one exporters of what we call Wahhabi ideology. It's extremist ideology that really has encouraged radicals within the religion of Islam. So the fact that they take this as seriously as they do, I think, is really what we should be looking at right now, and perhaps wondering whether the Saudis have turned a corner. I think it may be too soon to determine that, but at least they are signaling all the right moves here.
Yeah, that they're part of the game, and the U.S. State Department may be getting that kind of a message here, and they're going to be meeting in Brussels this month. Are they looking for a, all for one and one for all kind of feeling then?
Yeah, I think some solidarity among the Saudis. And by the way, the Saudis aren't alone. There's also the United Arab Emirates are part of this. In fact, I would argue that they are a more significant contributor to the coalition than the Saudis are. And there are some of the other Gulf states as well. Again, all playing relatively minor roles, but some playing some major roles in terms of basing and the like. And so I suspect that's the way that this will continue. But we are seeing a sense of seriousness across the board in tackling ISIS. I also think that it's probably some of this is tied to the collapse of the Syria talks in Geneva. That the Saudis are trying to show, particularly I think the Iranians and the Assad regime, that they are serious about cleaning up their own mess in the Middle East, and then perhaps preparing to take on their mortal enemies, the Iranians.
So there's a switching here in power structure. Here in Canada, how we're going to debate ISIS is a big political argument or discussion, and our new Prime Minister has backed away from the airstrikes. How important is all the countries' contributions right now?
Well, look, what we want to show is that there is a global coalition. I think at least that's the strategy for now. I should be quite frank in noting that it doesn't matter how many countries. You could have 193 countries involved in the bombing, but that as long as we continue with the current strategy, we're likely not to defeat ISIS. We've dropped 8 or 9 or perhaps even 10,000 bombs on ISIS since this campaign began, and we don't seem to have really done a lot of damage to the organization or its ability to continue to survive. And so, on the one hand, it's nice to see that global solidarity. On the other hand, there are those in this country, in the United States, where we're wondering, well, who's going to finally step up and actually take responsibility for the destruction of ISIS, not the degrading or the containment of ISIS, but to actually destroy it. Right now, it doesn't seem that there's anyone who's willing to fill that role. But I think it probably hurts the United States and some of the other leaders of the coalition when countries like Canada pull away from the coalition.
Yeah, and there are many Canadians who would agree. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, anytime.
All right. Jonathan is Vice President for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.